One of the biggest mistakes a lot of players in small stakes tournaments make is they do not play with a proper bankroll. So today, we are going to be discussing bankroll management for tournaments. Understand that if you don't have money in your bankroll to play poker, then you can't play. And if you cannot play, you cannot extract value and continue growing your bankroll. Understand, to win at poker, you have to do only 3 things. Sounds easy. Number 1, you have to find a game you can beat. You have to play a game where you have an edge, either because you're way better than your opponents or because, your opponents are terrible and anybody's better than them. But you have to find a game where you have an edge. Second, you have to play it a lot. You have to put your butt in the chair and play. If you play once a week, it's going to be hard to grow a bankroll because you're just not playing very much. But number 3, you have to keep a proper bankroll, and a lot of players forget that. So let's go through a lot of concepts pertaining to bankroll management, and then we're going to discuss how many buy-ins you should actually keep in your bankroll. First things first, you need to know roughly what your return on investment is when you play a tournament. Your ROI, return on investment, is how much you make on average in each tournament you play. Okay, how do we figure that out? Well, your ROI is your profit divided by your buy-ins. What is profit? Your profit are your cashes in the tournaments minus the buy-ins you put in. So, for example, let's say you play $110 tournaments. So your buy-ins are $1,000, and you cash for $1,500 over those 100 games. Well, what is your profit? Your profit is cashes, $1,500, minus buy-ins, which is $500, divided by your buy-ins, which is 50%. What if instead you only cashed for $500? Well, this would now be negative 500, so you'd be at negative 50%. And that's it. That's how you calculate your return on investment. Now, recognize that you will have a different ROI in each tournament that you play. Why is that? Well, because maybe the field is way bigger and there are just way more weaker players in the field. Maybe you're playing on a very difficult day where there are no satellite qualifiers and it's just the good, strong, regular players at your casino. Maybe you're playing a higher buy-in than normal and maybe your opponents are just better, right? It's up to you to make an accurate estimation of your return on investment in order to determine if you are properly bankrolled for a game. Because you may go from being bankrolled for a game at a specific buy-in level if the games are soft, but not properly bankrolled if the games are tough, because if the games are soft, for whatever reason, your return on investment will naturally be higher. But if the games are abnormally tough, your return on investment will be lower, and that could result in you being under bankrolled for buy-ins that you may normally be used to playing. I'll give you an example. One time, I flew to Los Angeles to play a $10,000 buy-in main event, and the day before the tournament, they had a $5,000 buy-in side event. I fully planned on playing it, but I got there, and I looked at the field, and it was 60 players total, 2 bad players, and 58 of the best poker players in the world. Now, do I expect to have much of an edge against the 58 best poker players in the world and 2 bad players? The answer is no. Even if I'm a little bit better than all the best players, and I'm way better than the bad players, maybe I'll win 10% return on investment on the day, which is $500, nothing to scoff at, don't get me wrong. But is it worth sitting there and playing a slow, structured tournament? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I decided it wasn't. I went downstairs and played cash games with a bunch of recreational players and won a bunch of money. But that's a spot where you're going to need a much bigger bankroll if you have a 10% return on investment compared to if you're playing a main event where you expect to have, 75% return on investment. As your return on investment gets higher, you need a smaller bankroll. And in general, I always recommend estimating your ROI to be lower than you actually are observing or that you actually think it is, just to be safe. And that's especially true if you've had some big wins. Now, in this example here, we only played 100 tournaments. 100 tournaments is not a lot. Can I make that crystal clear? 100 tournaments is not a lot. What happens to a lot of players is they win, let's say $3,000 over the course of $110 tournaments. And they all of a sudden think that they're amazing at poker because they have 200% return on investment. They think they need almost no buy-ins in their bankroll. They think they're going to crush the games and life's going to be easy. But they fail to realize 100 tournaments is not a lot. It's just not. So always underestimate your return on investment and always be logical and reasonable. And try to ask around about what good return on investments are. I can tell you right here, in very tough games, something like 5 or 10% return on investment is very good. like the tournaments that happen in the Poker Go studio that I regularly play, no one has a very big return on investment at all because everyone's very good. In soft main events that have a lot of players, you can probably have 50% return on investment, maybe 100% return on investment if you're really good. But you should certainly presume you're on the lower end of that just to be safe, right? In local tournaments, like say you play a local Friday $100 buy-in tournament, well, maybe you can win 20% return on investment or something like that if it's a kind of turbo one-day tournament, and maybe not even 20%. Now, you also want to make sure you account for the rake. Buy-ins here includes the rake. Notice, if we were playing, instead of $110 tournaments, we were playing $113 tournaments because they took $3 rake per tournament, now we would only be winning $200 or 20% return on investment. So having a large rake will very negatively impact your win rate. So make sure you account for the rake. Always underestimate your edge. It's very, 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 very important if you want longevity in poker. I learned that from my very first poker coach, a guy named Bill Seymour, and it's been a lifesaver because I've gone on big upswings where I could have easily overestimated my edge, and I've also gone on really big downswings where I'm really glad I had those extra buy-ins in my bankroll. So, what are reasonable bankroll requirements? Well, this presumes you have a 30% return on investment. And here we have the number of players in the field. As there are more players in the field, meaning there are more players playing the tournament, you need more buy-ins because there will naturally be way more variance. For example, if you're playing a 1,200 player tournament, you're not going to win it all that often. If you're really good, maybe you win it one in, 600 times. So if you play that every day, it's going to take you about 2 years to get a win on average. And even then, you can go on big downswings where you just don't win for like 10 years. It happens. This is why you see some players at, let's say, the World Series of Poker who have a bunch of bracelets, and some players who have none, assuming they all play big field World Series of Poker, no limit hold'em tournaments only. I personally have none. Does that mean I'm bad at poker? Ground, there's a bunch of trophies back here. Probably not bad at poker. Just means I've not ran particularly well. I have all sorts of other places at the final table, just haven't won. And you see other players who have a bunch of first. And, a lot of them have not done well on other tournament series because there's a lot of variance. It's important to realize there's a lot of variance in poker, so you have to plan ahead for it. Now, here we have, if you're playing 9-player tournaments with a 30% return on investment, you only need 24 buy-ins. Note, though, you will not have a 30% return on investment in a 9-handed tournament. No one is that bad, and these are usually fast-structured games, and for that reason, you might as well just ignore this top thing. Usually in 9-handed tournaments, you may have 10% return on investment, which makes you need more like 100 buy-ins. However, in 45-player tournaments or 90-player tournaments or 245-player tournaments in local casinos with a low rake, I do think you can reasonably have a 30% return on investment. And here are the number of buy-ins you need. So say you're playing a 45-player local tournament with a 30% return on investment after rake and accounting for rake, you may only need 69 buy-ins in your bankroll. Now, if you're playing $10 games, that means you need $690. A lot of people think that's they think that's a lot of buy-ins. And, maybe it feels like it, but it's not. It actually just isn't. And I think for that reason, this is why a lot of players go broke. They go on inevitable downswings. They lose 12 tournaments in a row and they think, oh my God, how am I running so bad? But get used to it. Every single poker player out there who has played a lot, even if they're good, has had 30 or 40 tournaments in a row with no cashes. And recognize, cashing is not necessarily even the goal. If you play good, strong, fundamentally sound poker, you may not cash a whole lot more than even bad players. But you'll win far more often, which is where you win a ton of the money. However, if you're playing, 500-player tournaments, you're still just not going to win all that often, so you have to be well prepared for variance. If you're playing giant field tournaments, you need a ton of buy-ins, like 375, maybe more, and this is what wrecks a lot of people. Now, you don't necessarily have to have the full 375 buy-ins in your bankroll. Maybe just have that money coming to you from your job. Or maybe you're taking a shot and you realize you're going to go play this tournament once a year. And it's probably not the best financial decision in this individual tournament, but it may not be that detrimental for you. And that could be true. But in general, as you take more and more high variance risks that are not very well calculated, that's just opening yourself up for bad things to happen. Let's talk about moving up though. Whenever you're playing tournaments, very rarely are you going to play the same buy-in all the time. For example, in your local casino, you may play $200 buy-ins, $300 buy-ins, $500 buy-ins, whatever. what you want to do for your return on investment to figure that number out is you can essentially add them all up. And that'll be your total buy-ins. You'll have your total cashes. However, you should definitely keep track of how you do at each stake, because you may find that you do way better at the $200 games than you do at the $500 games. And at least among people I have coached, and I've coached a bunch of them, they almost always do way better in the smaller games than the bigger games. For many reasons. First, there's just way more bad players in the smaller games, so your edge should be bigger. And as you move up in stakes and play bigger games, maybe the financial pressure gets to you a little bit. Maybe you're a little bit out of your comfort zone, and that makes you play a little bit worse, right? So the question becomes, how do you move up? Let's say you do get a hold of some money and you want to move up, you're properly bankrolled. How should you go about doing it? Well, you're going to want to increase your average buy-in. And you do that by adding larger buy-in soft events. When will events be the softest? Events are typically the softest when there is some sort of major tournament series in town, or if they're having a monthly, call it major tournament in your local casino that everyone goes to play, or maybe they do something at your casino where they give away a bunch of seats to a tournament each month to cash game players for playing a lot, and then you have a bunch of cash game players in the tournament, meaning they probably don't know how to play tournaments that well. Or maybe they satellite in a lot of players who are used to playing tiny stakes. Now they're playing 10 times the buy-in they're used to in a game where the structure is different than they're used to. All these things will make the game softer. So those are great spots for you to push it a little bit with your average buy-in, because that's when you should have a bigger edge. Now, when you are moving up, I don't think you should keep that big of a spread between the games you play. If you normally play, let's say, $200 games, you probably don't want to be playing $1,000 buy-in tournaments. This is what a lot of players do, actually. They play local $200 games all year. Then they take all that money to Vegas in the summer, and they start playing $1,500 tournaments, and they try to get rich. Usually they go broke. Then they go back home and they do it all over again. And they never get a hold of a lot of money because they're trying to get rich too fast. Poker is an amazing way to get rich slowly. You have to play within your bankroll. A lot of people don't like that. They want to get rich quick. Some people get rich quick from poker, but hate to break it to you, even if they do, a lot of those players don't hold on to it. So, what do you not want to do when you're moving up? Well, you want to avoid gigantic field events near the top of your buy-in range. And this gets a lot of players in trouble. Some major tournament series will come into town. Let's say you normally play $500 buy-in tournaments in your local casino. You're a good player, you're winning. And then a $3,500 buy-in tournament that's going to have 1,000 people comes to town. You normally play 100-player $500 games, and now you want to play this 1,000-person $3,500 buy-in game. That's a mistake. It really is. Now, maybe you want to sell some action to that and play it like it's a $500 game or a $1,000 game. That's probably fine. We're not going to talk about selling action in this video, but maybe that's okay. Essentially, then you're playing it with your same buy-in, just a bigger field in a soft game. That's fine. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to play 7 times your normal amount in a game that has a lot more variance. Doing that is a recipe for disaster. And it's going to be really, really hard to spike off one of those and then get a ton of money. And again, I realize it's alluring to do that because some people actually do run hot and they hit and then they're rich. But a whole lot of other people are stuck in the small stakes games forever. And I don't want that for you. Let's discuss moving down. What if things are going poorly? In tournaments, things will very often go poorly. If you look at a graph of tournament players' results, they often trickle down, 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 down. And then they spike when you have a win. Then it goes down, 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 down. And then it spikes when you have a win. And you may find that if you're not properly bankrolled, or even if you are, you may find that you sometimes need to move down. So how do you move down logically without completely crushing your win rate? Well, you're going to want to make a point to play in primarily the softest tournaments. This is especially the case if you have a job and other things going on in life. Focus on the games where you should have a big edge, usually nights and weekends. You're going to have a bigger edge than playing on, Monday at noon against a bunch of regulars. Also, avoid all gigantic field events. I've seen so many players think that their only way to get a hold of money or win that money back is to spike off some sort of big field event. And maybe that's true if you're down a lot, but at the same time, the goal is not to get even. The goal is to maintain your bankroll and continuously play in games where you have an edge. And trying to get rich quick, again, it's alluring. It's exciting when it happens, but it's not what you need to be going for if you want longevity in poker, which is what I want for you. Again, to win at poker, find a game you can beat, play it a lot, and keep a proper bankroll. And if you do that, you will thrive. And if you do not, well, you may get lucky, but I don't like relying on luck. Thanks for watching. If you have a friend who does not practice proper bankroll management, please show them this video. Maybe they'll listen, probably not. But if they do listen, they'll be forever grateful, and it could literally be a life changer for them. So do that. It's a good thing to do. I'll talk to you next time.